welcome to the amazing Louise Jameson.
Lovely to be here. Thank you.
So, well, you know, we've had a couple of attempts. I think it was 2000.
Last year.
Well, and before that, 2008. You had had it all worked out. You were all booked. You had a theater gig that came up over the summer and couldn't come, and you put us in touch with Mary Tam.
Yes.
So that was meant to be. Huh?
Yeah. So I'm very, very, very excited that you're here. Finally.
Thank
I've
you.
been looking forward to this since 2008.
Thank you.
We have a lot to talk about. You are a busy lady.
I am incredibly busy, yeah.
And you have had quite a career.
I'm in therapy for being too busy. I'm seriously.
But I want to start with what's probably the biggest news story of the past year, and that is Jodie Whittaker.
Okay, anybody here not like that idea?
And it's okay to be
brilliant.
honest. It's okay to be honest.
Yes, it is okay. It's sort of okay.
You're right.
Yeah, I think it's an about time. I texted Russell T. Davis, name dropping.
Right.
And said, "What do you think?" That's all I said. And he texted back, "I wish I'd had the courage."
Oh, wow, that's interesting.
He said, "It's great." I said, "I'm amazed that a program that is about inclusivity, that's its main theme, there's been such a backlash." There was like a huge backlash on Twitter. And Russell said that's probably 30 people that have all got 100 identities. And he said that we must ignore them, and that it's absolutely brilliant, and also nothing is set in concrete. That's the marvelous thing about the program, is that everything can change. There's reason to go anywhere, do anything, be whatever sex orientation you want to be. I mean, it's just fantastic from that point of view. So if it doesn't work, it will. He also said that the future is ruthless. And I went, "Oh, that's a great title for something." And he said, "You can have it." He said, "Have it, it's mine." And at the time, I was writing a script for Omega Factor, which is one of the...
We're going to talk about that.
That Big Finish bring out. And I use it as the last line. And I wrote and told him that I'd used it. So I can now say I've co-written with Russell T. Davies.
You were on the show in '77, which is kind of a period where you have this sort of wave of feminism and women power and all this kind of stuff. Were you aware at the time that Leela was sort of iconic, or was it a little bit later on when people identified as her having been sort of a part of that movement?
That's a really interesting question. It's I knew women in general were having, as they are now actually, having a huge resurgence of recognition and respect. I mean, you've had the whole Me Too campaign over here, have you? Yeah, and all that goes along with that, which I think is marvelous. So I knew Women's Lib had arrived from America in about '73, I suppose. So we weren't calling it feminism then. We were calling it women's liberation.
Right, that's true.
But I knew women were having a tidal change was happening. But I honestly, genuinely thought I was going into a children's TV program, which is, what Doctor Who was billed at. And then suddenly, what with the leather leotard, I went on after the football results. So the television's still on in the corner, and then this woman arrives in the leather leotard, and suddenly there's another 2.5-3 million viewers onto Doctor Who. And I'm, naively thinking that this is my talent that is making this happen. And of course, with hindsight, you realise, as Philip Hinchcliffe famously said, that Leela was for the dads. That was the, which is patronising and flattering in equal measure. It's interesting how I view it now as to how I viewed it then. I mean, to me, she should be wearing a leather leotard. That's, you know, she lives in the jungle, it's hot, it's not gratuitous. However, it is gratuitous, really.
Yeah, and it's
isn't it?
sort of it's almost kind of a sexist position to put a character in. You are there for the dads who are watching the football results to stay watching. But from that, she became this really powerful, really strong woman who so many other women identified with.
And the fan mail from women to the program, not just to me, went up. So it had I think in a way, Doctor Who has sort of happened by accident. It's like it was the first female, you know, the very first one was the first female producer and Asian director. It was thought of by an Australian. It's like they're going, oh, what program can we tick all the boxes on that we have to tick? And they did it, and then it suddenly was this, you know, iconic, life-changing drama going out, and it's thanks to the fans that it's come back, because, you know, Russell T Davies is a fanboy, and you know, they all are, and the Doctor Who magazine just kept going through the barren period, and it's all due to the fans that it's here. It really is a fan-owned show.
This is kind of a little bit of a sidebar, but talking about ticking all the boxes, Carol Ann Ford once said that for Verity Lambert, it wasn't just that she was a woman producing a show, it was that she was a young person.
Yeah.
Because the BBC at that time was very, you know, the old establishment, and to have a radical young person come in to lead a show like that was as shocking as her being a woman.
And what a thing to take a punt on. You know, a police box in time and space. Yeah, right. It's like, and he's, you know, traveling with his granddaughter. She wasn't his granddaughter originally. You probably know all that. They thought it was a bit indecent to have an old man traveling with a young girl. So they made them related. That made it all right.
Excuse me. Now, I know we're going to get a lot of questions from the audience about the TV show, but I want to talk to you a little bit about Big Finish, because your involvement with Big Finish has just blossomed into a whole range of things. I want to talk about how you got involved in Big Finish to start with. What was your connection there?
Okay, so go right back to my first day's filming as Leela.
Oh, wow.
And we hadn't had much rehearsal because we used to do the filming and then come and rehearse and then do the studio. So we were filming it's true then, the evil one does eat jelly babies. We were filming that scene. So we just finished doing that, and I've gone to shower off all the makeup, and there's on my door, and I open it, and there's a little boy there, aged 11-ish. And he said, could he have my autograph, even though I wasn't on camera? And his father is on sound in the next studio. And so I sign, and I, you know, it's lovely, and who do I make it out to? And he said, my name's Gary Russell. So my very first Leela autograph was to Gary. Thank goodness I was nice to him.
That really came back around now years later.
So yes, karma. So then I can't remember which year. Somebody here probably knows. I was asked to do Gallifrey.
Yes, the series.
Yeah.
Right.
And the rest is history. You know, it just escalated from there.
Now, what's interesting about Gallifrey is that, you know, on the series, Leela stays behind on Gallifrey and marries Andred. And in Big Finish, Romana is the Lord President of Gallifrey. You and Lalla Ward are very different people. Yes. But you have become such close friends.
Yes, it's odd, isn't it? She sends me up all the time. I'm completely homeopathic, and she thinks that's absolute nonsense. And when my teenage children were being appalling to live with, you know, when you still love them but you don't like them very much. And she sent me a book called "Why Are They So Weird," which is a scientific explanation of why teenage children are difficult. Apparently there's something in your brain that doesn't quite close up until you're about 22. There are people nodding in the audience who know a lot more than I know. And so that you stop being the center of your own universe in your early 20s. Well, most people do. it takes a while for teenagers to get there. So she has a scientific explanation for everything. And there's one Gallifrey story where we swap personalities, where I become all efficient and scientific and she becomes all hippy-dippy and airy-fairy. And she loved it. She was in the booth next to me and she was kind of going all floaty while she was doing, I could see her moving around. But yeah, we are really, really, really good friends. You know, first and foremost, we're women who share very similar politics. So there's that in common. And we're both, you know, I'm not, in her eyes, I may be stupid, but I'm not. Trust me, I'm not. And she's got the brain the size of a planet. So, you know, and she does this enormous amount of charity work, which I have such respect for. And she copes a lot with people with dementia. And every time somebody dies at Denville Hall, she's fighting back the tears. She gets completely emotionally involved with all of them, but she can appear, I'm sure she'll forgive me for saying this, she can appear quite distant because actually she's very shy. Deep down, she's an incredibly shy person. And but once you get through that, she's adorable. Yeah, I have huge respect for her.
Gallifrey is a very interesting series.
Yeah.
You know, have you enjoyed doing that? It's gone for how many series now? It's a lot.
9?
Yeah,
9?
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's all like political drama and all this and it's just a fascinating series.
I know, it's terrific. But she does it because I prepare very thoroughly for everything I do. I even know where I'm breathing virtually. And occasionally a visiting artist will go, oh, can you explain, where are we now? Because sometimes we jump about in recording because of availability, and I'll go, well, this is because so-and-so's taken over that planet, and we've got to la, la, la. And she goes, you understand these stories? So yeah, it does. Sometimes I need to be reminded because they've taken Leela off on so many different tangents and travels. I mean, my main line is with Tom, obviously.
Yeah.
So that's the one I hold on to and do most regularly. So when I jump back to something where I've been educated or haven't been educated, or I'm still in my leathers, or I'm wearing Time Lord Guard clothes, or, you know, whatever, I just need to be reminded a bit. I get a bit confused there.
Oh, sure. I mean, that's Big Finish is interesting because you are jumping into all these different parts of Leela's life, and it would take a little preparation. It would take some reminding.
Yeah.
This is who she is at this point.
Yes. Yeah. I've been killed off in a companion chronicle. I wish they'd bring me back from that one. I don't like it. One that Nigel Fairs wrote. Yes. So we're pushing to have, because he wrote it as part of 9 stories.
Yeah.
And I think we've only done 2 of them. So yes, I want that one to continue.
Now with Big Finish, it's not just Doctor Who.
No.
You have done a lot of. I mean, this whole Big Finish thing has really, you know, grown for you. You are doing a modern version of Omega Factor, which is a series that you did for the BBC in the
79.
80s, 79.
79.
Okay. Yeah.
It was my next big series for the BBC, and I got to be the Doctor.
Yes.
Dr. Anne Reynolds. Yes, and they've let me be my own age, which is fantastic. I'm glad they're not expecting me to be running around in a leather leotard in my imagination. No, that they've let the department travel on, and Jimmy no longer with us. Wonderful James Hazeldine. They've introduced a character who's his son, played by John Dorney, brilliantly, I think, really, really well. So we've got a kind of mother-son relationship going, as opposed to a potential lover relationship going. But the stories are pretty much the same, and of course they can be, I think, so much scarier on sound, because the best films are in your head, aren't they?
How did that come about? Was it Big Finish that approached you about doing Omega Factor, or did you bring it to them?
No, David Richardson, who's turned into an incredibly good friend, came to me and said, would I go with him to have lunch with Natasha, can't remember her last name. Thank you.
He will have every answer you need.
Yes, good. And he said, because I'm trying to get the rights for Omega Factor, and if you come with me, it'll legitimize it. And let her see that I'm really serious. So the 3 of us had lunch together. She was thrilled that we wanted to pick it up. And she said, could she have a part in it? And David said yes. And I went, she's mute. She's mute in the series. How can you have a mute person on audio? What are we going to do? Anyway, we found ways around it. She appears in dreams and visions and, you know, big dramatic moments. She comes to the rescue through the zeitgeist. So she's wonderful to have around, and really delighted that we've had her communicate with the son as well, with Tom Crane. We've had her communicate there, so you know, through telepathy. So there's all kinds of ways that you can get around it.
Interesting.
Yeah. I even gave Anna Love Life. How about that? Yeah, in one story.
Now, you also have a new series with Big Finish of your own creation.
Yeah.
Tell us about this, because it sounds exciting.
So in Second World War, some of you probably know about this, that there was a air transport auxiliary, which took pilots who'd been wounded out of actually fighting, that were too old or too injured but could still fly, and they would deliver planes to the front line, as well as picking them up and transferring them from factory to factory. They would fly to the front line without radio or radar, or sometimes they'd have trained on a Tiger Moth and then been put into a Spitfire. What isn't known that it was 126 of these women, of these pilots were women. And it started with an initial corps of 8 run by a woman called Pauline Gower, who got equal pay for equal work, you know, way back then. And we're still fighting. Do you fight for that over here? We're still fighting for that.
Yeah.
We're still 17% behind a man's wage. So, yeah, we took these 8 women and we fictionalized them, much like Tenko, the series Tenko.
We're going to get to that. Don't
we
worry.
we took real live stories and transformed them and just put a smidgen of real characters in there to give it some authenticity. We've got a female producer called Helen Goldwyn, who is she's a singer, a lyricist, a musician, a playwright, an actress, and now a producer, a writer. She and I have teamed up a lot. She wrote a one-woman show for me, which is a comedy about whether to have a facelift or not. As you can see, I decided against it, but it was touch and go for a while there, back in my 50s. Anyway, so Helen and I we've become incredibly good friends, and she and I have championed this audio series called Atta Girl, and written by, as I say, 4 women. They're very moving, incredible stories, and I think the rumour is that BBC are going to put that the Big Finish are going to put them forward for the BBC Audio Drama Awards. So I'm
excellent.
Crossing everything, and you mustn't tell anyone this, but one of the producers of Downton Abbey wants to meet with me. So I'm holding my breath till I turn blue. With she wants a female-led World War II story. So we've done all the research. We've got all the writers in place. We've got some wonderful actors. Let's just hold our breath. Yeah.
Oh, wow, that's amazing.
It would be amazing.
That is amazing.
Yeah. And I've written myself a cameo. That's just the icing on the cake.
Now, you've been a strong proponent about the film and television industry letting women age.
Yeah.
And the play came from, that whole facelift.
Yeah.
Should I or shouldn't I?
Yeah.
So what was your thought process behind that? And how did you come to the decision that you...
Well, I think I came to the decision to have a facelift because of the menopause, which, of course, is very rarely spoken about or alluded to. So I think, between the ages of approximately 48 to 52, it's tough for women. Your hormones are all over the place. It's as you were in puberty or pregnancy. It's not a good time to make decisions. You need patient people around you. Talking to the men in the room here. You just need to be nice to your women, and it'll pass. It will pass. And I feel much better now than I did at 52. And if things are a bit rocky, and my private life is a bit rocky, your self-esteem and your value goes down. And because the parts, there was a time in my 20s where I had the choice of 11 different parts in, various films or staged, and that doesn't happen anymore. I do still get approached. I do still get offers. I'm incredibly lucky because of that. But it's not like they're not lining up at the door. You know, it's not, my career isn't what it was. And that's a lot to do with there not being the parts around. There are many more parts written for women under 30 than there are for over 50. Which is why we need more women writers. I don't think we can sit back and whinge on that a 22-year-old doesn't know how to write about the menopause. Why would he? You know, seriously, why would he? You need people that have gone through an experience to write about it authentically. Not that I have to kill someone if I'm writing a murderer, you understand? That's not true. However, I do think we need more women writers. And when I wasn't exactly sacked from EastEnders, but I was let go in a very unceremonious way. And it was my 8th series, I think, for the BBC, something like that. And they told the papers before they told me. It was brutally handed. Whenever we've parted before, like at the end of Bergerac, after 4 seasons, it was time to move on. They called me into the press office. Is there anything we can do for you? What are you doing next? Can we help promote it? I mean, incredibly generous. And you expect that, well, no, they just went axed and the DeMarcos are leaving, we don't like them, new producer. And 3 months earlier, they'd asked if I'd be prepared to stay for 5 years. So they obviously were, you know, debating my future. But it was, so I just thought, I got very depressed after that, that my life could be so at the mercy of someone else's whim. I thought that's never going to happen again. So I put pen to paper. And, you know, started to write. So I'm now never out of work, because as soon as I'm not involved in something that someone else is creating, I have a million things to create. And I've got a commission hovering from Big Finish, and they're so good to me. You know, they said we've not put a deadline on this, but it's a 4-parter for me and Tom, which I really, really want to get done. So yeah, so during that time, I went to meet a specialist for a facelift, and I just went to have the bags under the eyes corrected, and he said, oh, we can do something about your jowls as well. And I went, jowls? I have jowls? And before I'd known it, I was, he did ding, 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 ding on the computer, turned it round, and I looked 18, and I thought, oh, yeah. And I'd signed the thing, and as I walked out, he patted me on my bottom, saw me out the door. And I thought, what did I expect? A politically correct plastic surgeon? It's not going to happen. Anyway, a job came up, so I had to postpone the operation, and I never reinstated it. I just never picked up the phone to reinstate it, to put it in place. And during that time, we wrote Pulling Faces, and it seemed like a sort of cathartic exorcism of a desire to try and be 18. It wouldn't have solved the problem. And I look at some of my girlfriends, and they look amazing. They've had some fantastic work done, and it's delicate and it's subtle. I look at some of them, and it's awful. I mean, really awful. Yeah. And I figure you buy about a decade for yourself, and then you kind of run out of skin to pull. And then you see these amazingly young, beautiful faces on these bodies that don't quite match it. So it's a very complicated issue. I mean, all for women doing what they want to do. I'm not saying don't do it, but when I was thinking about it, do you know Eileen Atkins? She said to me, don't do it. She said, she's got a very wrinkly, rather beautiful face now. And she said, my phone doesn't stop. They cannot find a wrinkly woman in Hollywood. So I don't know. I feel good and comfortable. I'm presented daily with images of myself. Today being a prime example of my images of myself at 26, 27. And I was terribly worried about what I looked like then. And now I look at it and I think, what were you worried about? But I have a nostalgia, but it doesn't feel like it kind of felt like a bereavement at one point. And it doesn't feel like that now. And actually, there's so much going on in the world. To worry about your wrinkles just seems unnecessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, unnecessary waste of energy. That's
Okay. Now, you have a whole history of television jobs, but I know that your first love is theater.
yeah.
So what draws you to the theater? And even now as a writer, you've written.
Theatre.
Yeah, you have. And so what's your attraction to theater? What is it that you love?
I'm not a religious person, but I do think that the church, that the theatre is part brothel, part chapel. I think it's very, very sexy, and I think it touches the divine. The group energy of a silence, a collective silence, has something incredibly magical about it.
Yeah.
When everybody in the room is concentrating on a pinhead of emotion, and you know that I think people should leave a theatre slightly altered from how they arrived, be that happier, sadder, wanting to debate, discuss, feeling relaxed. I think there's a space for Ray Cooney farces because it just gets everyone's endorphins up. But I've just finished a play called Vincent River, which is about hate crime, and it's written by Philip Ridley, who's a fantastic poet and playwright. And it's a really dark piece. It's about an older woman who invites her teenage stalker into her apartment, and you find out why during the course of 90 minutes. And it's obviously it's anti-hate crime. It's a play about hate crime. And at the end of it, people couldn't clap. People just sat there, and the stage manager had to start the applause every night because people were like so rocked by it. And I would come out into the bar afterwards. It was a fringe theatre, and you walk through the bar, and people were like sobbing into their gin and tonic with the emotion of it. And it looks like it's going to have a transfer to the Trafalgar Studio Theatre in August, which I'm thrilled about. But it's the kind of play, and I thank the writing. And my fellow actor, Tom Mahy, M-A-H-Y, it's his first job. He's brilliant. People will campaign against hate crime, and people will phone their MPs members of parliament because of this play. And when theatre can do that, it's a safe place to debate dangerous issues. And if it's on television, then people are making a cup of tea and chatting, and this is a bit violent, turning it up. There isn't that concentration of the lights are down, the actors are there, and we can transport you. It's an ancient art, storytelling, and I'm proud to be part of it.
Wow, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, now, this is going to sound a little lurid, but it isn't. I've had this fantasy about you. I
helped many a young man through a difficult phase.
But my fantasy, which goes back about 30 years, was that I would meet you someday, maybe at a convention, maybe in a hotel, and we'd sit down at the bar, and I could just ask you hours and hours and hours of questions about Tinko. Oh my God, who has seen Tinko? It is still the best drama series I have ever seen. Unbelievable.
Oh,
and I know you've told me that it was your favorite television job.
Yeah.
Tell us about working on Tinko and...
Well, it's lovely Pennant Roberts who got me the part. I was originally offered the part of Rose, which Stephanie Beacham played brilliantly.
God, I love her. She's amazing.
Pennant said, well, you've got to come in and meet... Oh, sorry, I'm mucking up the mic. Pennant, I could hear it. Pennant said, Pennant said, come in and meet the producer. It's just a formality, but he wants to just lay eyes on you. And I walked in, and he said, you're far too much of a tart. He said, I think I'm going to offer you the part of Blanche. And then they sat me down in a room. Do you know this? Have I told you
I don't
this?
know, maybe not.
They sat me down in a room with 7 scripts and 2 synopses and said, choose.
Wow.
And they literally put me in a room, locked the door. It would never happen now. And at that point, Blanche was 2 episodes less. I didn't get to go to Singapore or Kuala Lumpur. It was all my stuff was in England.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But you know, about 1 in 20 scripts, you get a script and the script just bounces off that. It's like you've been that person in a former life or something. It just bounced off the page, and I thought, Blanche has got my name on it. So I took Blanche, and because of that, because it was 2 months where the others were working and I wasn't, I got to slip in a little play called Whose Life Is It Anyway? Mm-hmm. I played the doctor, and I met the father of my first child doing that play. So all in all, that whole episode, that whole summer of 81, I think it was just meant to be.
Wow.
Absolutely. So Tenko is a series about a female prisoner of war camp, but it's not a usual war story. It's how women cope in adversity, which is why I like the Attagirl stories so much as well. It's not all about who's killing who, but we have some of that, but basically it was about how women cope and which tribe you belong to and how you support or not each other. And my character was a prostitute, and so she ended up sleeping with the guards, so she got a few favors, but it meant a lot of the other women would shun her because of her morality, but then she ended up getting medicine sometimes to save people's lives, and then she wasn't so unpopular.
Yeah.
But I think between Blanche and Leela, there is actually a lot of similarities. They were both very intelligent but uneducated. They both had very difficult family backgrounds. They were both outsiders. They were both in foreign places. Yeah. You know, they were both feisty. Much feistier than Louise am. You know, neither of them had a censorship between their brain and their mouth. They just, what you see is what you got. And I kind of envy that. Maybe that's why I'm attracted to those roles. I want to be liked all the time by everybody, basically. I think a lot of actors are like that.
I know you've had a lot of lasting friendships from that cast.
Oh, yeah.
With Stephanie Cole.
Steph Cole, Steph Beach, and Veronica Roberts is a really, really, really dear friend. I mean, we've been emailing while I've been here, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, she directed, in fact, a play that I wrote with my gay best friend called My Gay Best Friend.
Right.
So, and she directed it beautifully.
Oh, I didn't even know that she had directed that.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Now, speaking of theater, you and another Doctor Who person that you're very good friends with, Colin Baker, you have done a lot of theater together.
We have. I keep playing his wife.
Yeah, that's true.
He did a restoration comedy recently. Oh, I wonder if he'll mind me telling you this. Anyway, he rang me up.
He'll never know, don't worry.
He's a,
right.
Okay, so he must never know. I'm trying to think of his first wife's name. I'm looking at you. Yes, thank you very much.
I told you.
Yes, also on Bergerac. So Lisa Goddard and I we're very good friends, as are Colin and I, but they had a pretty acrimonious separation and hadn't seen each other for a long time. So he gets offered this restoration comedy and he rings me up and he goes, "Are you free for the next 5 months?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I've just seen the cast list. And Lisa and I have been cast opposite each other, and I'm frightened that I fear that when I walk into the rehearsal room, she's going to walk straight out, and I want to go, 'Louise, come in.' I want to know if you're..."
Wow.
So anyway, she walked in, and they threw their arms around each other, and they had a really lovely tour, and all the hatchets were buried, and it was fantastic. But he does like working with me, and I know. And we did a Pointless together. Do you get Pointless over here? No, you don't.
We don't.
Okay, so it's a quiz game where you have to supply the most unlikely answer. They ask 100 people a question, and if 88 people give the answer, you have to find an answer that nobody's given, a pointless answer.
Nice.
Okay, so and you work through various rounds, and they do the occasional celebrity one. Normally, it's Joe and Joanne Public do it. So I'm standing beside Colin, he goes, don't you let me down. You let me down. I was out first round last time. Don't you let me down. And who let us down? We also did an eggheads where I was awful because he bullied me into doing the science round because he wanted to be in the general knowledge round because he's got a very big brain, Colin. He trained as a lawyer, you know.
Yeah, sure did.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sure somebody has questions for Ms. Jameson, so if you want to come up to the microphone here,
Oh, you have a mic. Good.
then we will have some questions. Start us off.
Well done. Nice costume.
Isn't that great?
Am I the only one up here? I was fond of times when the doctor would be belittling your character, calling her savage and such. If you think back now, if you have had a chance to tweak one of those scripts, how would it go about? So in the end result that the doctor would apologize for calling you a savage in the past and respect your character.
That's a very good question. Okay, so it was written in a time where there wasn't such political awareness. So for that, I forgive it a little. But now what happens with Big Finish, he does call me savage quite a lot, but he uses it like a term of endearment. You know, if we're separated for a while or I save his life, it's a thank you, savage. And it's like it's taken on a whole other connotation. But you've given me food for thought. I mean, maybe I should go back and go, I want to speak. Actually, I could put it in the script I'm writing, couldn't I?
Yes, you could.
Do you remember the time when you called me?
Yes,
I could do
there
and
you
I
go.
could
There you
do.
go.
I could redress it that way. Do you wanna credit?
Sure, why not?
Thank you for your question.
Hi, it's lovely
Hello.
to see you.
And you.
So I get curious about this with all the Big Finish folks, that not only are you playing Leela in a sort of a different production environment, but also you're now playing Leela at different times in her life.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about your thought process of, okay, this is how I've developed the character since I played her 40 years ago. And not only that, but now I have to play her, older as well. So how does the character develop in that regard?
Again, another interesting question. I've had a script recently that I've done for Big Finish. I'm struggling. It hasn't been released yet, so you won't know the answer. But I'm struggling for the name of the writer. Forgive me. He was responsible for developing Land Girls. This man, Phil, somebody. Anyway, he didn't quite get Leela's voice. It doesn't happen often, but he gave her words like indigenous, and there was another one in there. But they are, because the atmosphere is so good and non-threatening, and because everybody at Big Finish wants the end result to be the best possible thing it can be, I'm allowed to go in, and they know I'm a writer, I'm allowed to go in to the studio and go, is it okay if we just change this a little? I don't think she's quite that, in this particular storyline, I don't think she's quite that developed yet. I mean, when she's working on Gallifrey with Lala, she could use a word like indigenous, but in the whole Tom Baker, he's still broadening her vocabulary. And unless there's been a scene where a word is introduced or an attitude is introduced, then you can't justify just dropping it in like that. So I keep a wary eye on it. And David Richardson always says to me, he said, I always feel like I've got another editor on the, I don't know if he's irritated by it or pleased, but we've got another editor on the script because and are, passionately concerned about keeping Leela, what's the word I want? Believable isn't the word, but that's what I mean, authentic. Yes, thank you. Keeping Leela authentic, that I feel she's in very safe hands. So, yeah, I keep a wary eye, basically.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
I'm a playwright and playwriting teacher by profession, so I love the line, half brothel, half chapel. Is that original with you? Because I want to credit it properly when I use it going forward. Do you know if you've heard that somewhere?
Do you know, I'd like to say it is, but you know, us writers, we just plagiarize. We plagiarize life, don't we? I've probably read it somewhere, if I'm really honest, but I couldn't tell you where.
That's one for Barbara.
Credit me.
Credit.
Credit me and say, by the way, she's a plagiarist. So.
As am I, so, yeah. I also, there's something I've been wanting to ask you for years and years, and I blush to ask it because it is sort of about the salaciousness of Leela's on-screen appearance. And you're so magnificent in Talons of Wing Chun. And you get to be Eliza Doolittle, right?
Yes,
Which
exactly.
is part of what's wonderful about that. But there is this wet T-shirt moment.
Yeah.
Which, when I was 16, I appreciated tremendously. So, thank you for that. But now, a little older, a little more evolved, I look at that and I think, my God, here's a RADA-trained actress standing here with electrical cables on the floor, and she is soaking wet.
Yeah. I'll tell you something
Any
about
special
that
memories
scene.
about that? Yes.
I have a lot of memories about that scene. At the time, I had what I thought was glandular fever, but has since been diagnosed as an allergy to the smoke gun. You know, which of course in Doctor Who you're surrounded by smoke a lot of the time. And it's not just for the scene, you know, it's for the rehearsal, it's for the lighting guy, it's for when you're standing around for special effects. So, you know, playing Wicked Queen in pantomime is a nightmare for me because I get these glandular fever symptoms. It's
I think it has glycerin in it.
It's oil-based, yeah. Well, I'm not allergic to dry ice, which is water-based, but it's so expensive, most managements won't use it. So I thought I had glandular fever. I was very ill at the time. They'd only just painted the sewer in the studio, so they couldn't put hot water in there because of the mixture with the paint, because it was still tacky. They could only put cold water in. We had the infamous giant rat, but we also had some authentic rats, which were let loose. So my nipples showing were the least of my worries. I just wanted to get that scene over just as quickly as, if you look closely at the thing, I have such bags under my eyes during that whole process. Also, in the 60s, nobody wore a bra anyway. It was just a kind of, you know, fashionable, you didn't think about it thing going on. So I agree with you. Of course, it was an incredibly sexist shot, but at the time, I just was in and out of there as quickly as possible. Yeah.
I'm kind of glad to hear that. Other things to worry about.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hello.
So many of the companions are kind of interchangeable, but there's only one Leela, and there's never really been a companion like her before or after, right? And she starts off as this warrior, and it's why it cheeses me off that she winds up just leaving because she gets married. Right?
I know.
I really,
Of all the
as much as I love
stories.
the character, I thought she should have died a warrior's death, right? And just get, and I guess I was wondering what your thoughts are.
I wanted to die saving the Doctor's life. Absolutely,
exactly.
yeah, completely. Just really doing it. And then have him, I believe they've done this story, but then having him come back and bringing me back to life, going back in time, making it all right, but he had to wipe my memory to do it, or something, so that the kids weren't left thinking, oh, Leela's died, you know, but to have a sadness of them separating. I think, I know Graham very much wanted me to stay on, and even literally the night before we shot that scene, he came up to me in the studio and said, we can have you run in there and press the button. We don't have to have you. He was convinced he could change my mind, but he couldn't. So, you know, it's no secret that Tom and I didn't get on so well back in the day. I adore him now, and I don't want to dirt mouth him in any way. But it wasn't the best of atmospheres all the time. I'd been offered a Shakespeare role at the Bristol Old Vic, so my life was just moving on, really. And, you know, Tenko came along very shortly afterwards, and the Omega Factor and all that. So life was moving on for me. But Graham wanted me to stay, which is, I think, why it was so slimly written, so shallowly written. and also, you know, the BBC's answer to losing a woman, they get her to fall in love. And it wasn't so very long that women had to leave their jobs if they got married. You know, so there was still a kind of mindset that wasn't adventurous enough, I think. Hello.
You said Thomas WHOlanta was your favorite story. What was it about that one?
Actually, it was my second favourite, if I'm honest.
I know which one's your first.
Sunmakers was my absolute favourite. But I did love Talons because of its, boldness. And I love Victoriana. I live in a Victorian house, little end of terrace Victorian cottage. And I love it that I got out of my leather leotard
Yeah.
for a while, and I had my Eliza Doolittle moment.
Yes.
Yeah. And we were on location, which always makes for a good, lovely, happy atmosphere. So I think Robert Holmes was the Russell T Davies of the 70s.
Oh, absolutely.
I think he's just the most wonderful writer, and he and I got on very well. So he was very kind to me in the scripts, in both Sunmakers and Talons. He was very kind to me. So that's why I loved it.
What's interesting about Sunmakers is that the story concept kind of came from a run-in that he had with the tax man,
yes.
but
And
it
the
turned
BBC.
into a script that's really defining for Leela.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Very interesting, and he well, it's pure Marxism actually. If you analyse it, it couldn't be more left wing, freeing oppressed workers, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a pleasure to meet you in person, Ms. Jameson.
And you.
I just wanted to ask this. In the show, we see you so much using a knife, even throwing the knife so much. How much training or help did the BBC stunt people give you while working on the show with that? Because doing that, it has to take some skill.
I think they wish they'd given me more because during Robots of Death, I very, very nearly killed a cameraman. They gave me, if you look closely, I got a real knife in the first story, which is called
Face of Evil.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Face of Evil. And then in Robots of Death, I had to get a knife into one of the robots. And I don't know how it happened, you know, like you're the cameraman and the robot's over there and I'm throwing the knife and it's somehow like this past the cameraman. So for take two, there was nobody in the studio except one quaking cameraman and me. Everybody else left. Anyway, I did it all right, and then they turned up with a very, very, very blunt knife, which they hastily wrapped the string around, which years later got sold for £1,000, and the money went to Romanian orphans. Yeah.
Hello again, Louise.
Hello.
As you know, we sadly lost Sir John Hurd last year.
Yeah.
So what memories can you share about working with him on the War Doctor audios?
War Doctor. Well, was a force to be reckoned with, Mr. Hurt. And it's the only time Big Finish have allowed their cast to go to the pub at lunchtime. Because if Sir John Hurt says we're going for a drink, everyone goes, okay. And that, I worked with him in, I think it was about 74, right at the beginning of my career and just before his took off. It was just before he'd filmed Quentin Crisp, the Quentin Crisp movie called...
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Someone else besides me knows something.
I want everyone in this room to be my phone a friend on Millionaire, definitely. You're definitely on the list. So yes, I worked with him way back in the very early days, and then at the beginning of my career and at the end of his. So I feel very privileged.
Yeah, what a beautiful performance in that 4-box set too.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Louise, I met you 30 years ago at a convention in Macon, but this may be a weird question, but you're one of the episode Horror of Fang Rock. I heard it was the only time that somebody ever interrupted the episode with their own, probably whatever it was,
With
their own bit or whatever. There was it was like in November '87, they were showing a rerun, and the guy dressed as like a Max Headroom character. I don't know, did you ever hear about that? What was your opinion on that?
Yeah. A guy dressed as Max Headroom. You have any idea who that is? He's sort of a faux animated character. And they broke into the broadcast of that story on a PBS station in Chicago.
Did they? No, I didn't know about this. I have to look it up on YouTube. Was it to raise money or to...
No, it was just to do it.
Being crazy.
Just as a dare? Was it you?
I'm sorry they interrupted your show that time.
That's okay. I forgive them. I interrupted I have a story about horror of Fang Rock. I interrupted the recording, which is it's not something I do often, but as I say, Tom and I weren't getting on terribly well, and we'd organised, we'd rehearsed me up in the lighthouse, and then I hear footsteps on the stairs, and I draw my knife and I walk slowly over to the door, and I open the door, and relief, it's the doctor. So what was happening was I was hearing the footsteps, and then Tom was opening the door, therefore cutting, close up, suspense, creeping across the room, opening the door, go to him. So he was getting them to cut early, and I stopped and I went, that's not quite what we rehearsed. You came in a bit quickly, Tom. Can we do that again? And the second time he did it, and I went, it's not quite what we third time I did it, and do you know what? My heels went into the floor. I thought, I am digging these in, and I'm going to get my close up. And also it served the story, so it wasn't purely my ego talking, although there was a bit of that. Anyway, fourth time he waited, and I got my way, and I went up to him in the tea break, and I said, I'm sorry, Tom, but I just thought the story needed. He went, that's all right, love. And I thought, why didn't I do this weeks ago? And Paddy Russell took me to one side and said, be careful, you're getting a bit uppity. She didn't say up your own bottom, but so I had very mixed reactions, but the crew all went, well done, know what you're doing, well done.
Okay, we have one last question that we can sneak in if it's quick.
Okay. I'm a little embarrassed to say that I've had absolutely no exposure to you or any of your work before this panel. But from listening to you talk, you're very wise and interesting. And I wonder, are you writing an autobiography? Because I don't buy it.
Do you know, I started it, and I just wept. It just made me cry, and I thought, do you know what? I don't think I can. I was going to do like a mosaic, maybe I will. Some really stories written in great detail, and then gloss over the next 5 years, and then somebody tweeted me yesterday and said, Louise Jameson, catnip to the gays. And I thought that would make a great title for an autobiography.
Well, Louise, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
You're a wonderful, amazing woman.